Okay, can I welcome you all to the Climate Change Member Advisory Board on Tuesday, the 8th of December. We have a number of apologies, but fortunately a very good attendance as well. But Ruth Deleu has given her apology. She's very much involved with setting up these arrangements with the military for COVID testing and so on. And Sarah Byrne as well. James Sutton is, I hope, going to join us later on. Councillor Trant has said that he's going to try and make it, but he may be late, but he's got a local problem he's trying to deal with at the moment. So if we can, then we'll go on to first of all, are there any other apologies, by the way? No. Okay.
Oh, Councillor, so we have James Williams as an apology as well.
Yes, of course, and James Flower in his place, and welcome, James. So that's. If there are no other apologies, then can I direct your attention to the minutes of our last meeting? What I'll do, I'll go through these page by page in case anyone wants to raise anything, and then we'll just check them as a correct record. But before I do that, did you wish to speak, Vince?
Thanks, Howard. It's just there's a matter missing from the minutes, so I'm happy to pick it up now. I can't recall exactly which page it would be on, but there was a conversation we had, detailed conversation around Rochester Bridge, and that's just yes. Yeah, that's not mentioned anywhere in there. So if that can be added accordingly, that would be much appreciated. Thanks very much.
Yeah, this was to do with the cycle lane. We talked about the cycle lane outside Gun Wharf. But we didn't. We also talked about the cycle lane across Rochester Bridge, and you know, the fact that is going to be removed.
Okay, Howard, we'll have that added under this item for the minutes. That's fine.
Thank you very much. Okay, then page 1. Page 2, a lot of this stuff has been is being dealt with by later on in the meeting anyway.
Yeah.
Page 3.
It's Adrian Howard, just to comment on 14.19, where I asked for the update on the EV pilot for the social workers. I've confirmed I've had a nice lot of photographs sent to me of the cars all.
That's on page 4, yeah.
Yeah. So that's our first bit of EV work for the council anyway, up and running, which is good news.
Well, we'll come on to electric vehicles, of course, later on the agenda, but yes, that's excellent. So, page 4, anyone else? Page 5. And the final page.
Great.
Right. Can I take it? That is. Can I just ask you to signify your approval in the usual manner? Those the members, please, if you'd like to call the roll.
Howard, could I suggest that we do it perhaps on an exceptions basis, that we would take it as agreed unless members...
That's allowable, yes. I think it probably is, isn't it, for this? If everybody's happy, we'll do that. If you don't stick your hand up and say you object, then we'll assume you agree with it. So do you agree those minutes as a correct record, subject to that one alteration being included?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interests?
Vince?
Yes, I have, Howard. On the item on solar together, I've subscribed to the package, so I'm going to be acting as a mystery shopper for it. So.
Right. We won't be any mystery now.
We'll come to that, Howard.
Okay.
I've got a couple, Howard, if just quickly on the active travel and the Urban Tree Challenge Fund. Because of my role as chairman of the Local Access Forum and the Urban Green Spaces, I'm heavily involved with volunteer activities in those two.
Well, thank you very much for that. Yes, that's no problem at all. And obviously you can speak and vote on that.
Yeah. And you've got Vince, Howard.
Yeah. Vince?
Thanks very much indeed. And it's just same as last time. Any reference to the area covered by Chatham Maritime Trust, I'm a council appointed trustee. Thank you.
Right.
And if there's any, as regards myself, if there's any mention of the Medway Development Company during our conversations, I expect there might be, then obviously I've got a declaration that covers that. So I can speak and vote on it and approved by the Council Conduct Committee. Okay, if that concludes.
Howard, yes, it's Adrian. I should mention the same declaration as well. That slipped my mind. You're absolutely right, of course.
Okay, that's fine then. Thank you, Adrian. I assume Richard's got all that, or somebody has. Good. Okay. Right, we'll come on then to item 4 with the hands of Michael Edwards, who's actually prepared for us a presentation. Would you like to bring that forward, please, Michael?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, if you bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen.
Good.
Okay.
Well, if you want to watch that car, I think it'd be offending against the fishing rights in the EU.
Okay, now let's just get that going in full screen. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that James Sutton has sent his apologies for the meeting today. So obviously I'm presenting the transport update. So we'll just run through a few items here where we've got some progress to report.
Okay, well, we'll let you run through and then we'll ask you any questions afterwards. That's all right.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, so that just outlines what I'm just going to be mentioning today. So I'll say a few words on EV ownership, and then just cover quickly the survey results and the draft strategy, go into some stakeholder engagement that we've been having, and then just basically present a little roadmap of where we're going over the coming months.
Thank you.
Okay, so this first slide, it just sets the scene really for our EV strategy, and shows the projected increase in ultra low emission vehicles from 1,500 registered in Medway in 2020 to a projected total of over 160,000 within the next 20 years. So that sets the scene quite nicely in terms of where we're going and what we need to do to meet that uptake. Right, at the last meeting, James covered the survey in some detail, so I'm not going to dwell on this, other than to say, obviously, in developing our strategy, it's important that we listen to residents' views and their preferences for charging locally. So ultimately, we ensure that the investment is used wisely with infrastructure installed in the right places. So it's obviously important to focus on areas where residents can't make the switch to EV without access to a public charging network. And also to ensure a good geographical spread. So the survey is still live. So we still monitor it on a regular basis, and obviously we've got some good data back on that will inform our strategy moving forward. Okay. So the draft strategy, this is an important document, so I'll just say a few words about it now. It's still in development, and I think it will be a case that at a future board meeting we'll present it to you and go into a bit more detail. But James has done an awful lot of work on this. The document has now been drafted. So obviously what this does is sets out the future vision and our long-term ambition for electric vehicles in Medway and the interventions that we'll take to deliver this. So as well as a vision and objectives, it includes a baseline for the number of and location of existing charging infrastructure in Medway and the current EV uptake scenarios. And it also provides details of suitable locations for EV charging point infrastructure. So it also covers the general principles for charging point locations and accessibility to them. So it looks into things like charging point equipment, charging point installation, payments, and the management systems and the energy supply as well. There's a little bit there around an FAQ document, which supports some of the work that we're doing at the moment and gives that information on our website. So you can just see 3 pages that we've extracted there and put on the presentation. So this goes through and addresses the most common questions around EVs, ownership, charger types, and that sort of thing. So it's a good source of information for people going onto the website so they can find a bit more, find out a bit more about it all. Okay. Just a few words on some of the stakeholder engagement and other updates that we've been undertaking since our last board meeting. Just wanted to say a few words about the Kent and Medway EV district network. So we're very much part of this conversation. It is a group run by KCC, and the overall aim is to ensure that we have a consistent charging network across the whole of Kent and Medway. So this would cover potentially 150 public car parks across Kent and Medway, creating charging hubs where charging points are installed for visitor use and resident charging overnight. So as part of this conversation, UKPN have already been engaged and have given us some details on the grid capacity at each of the locations covered there. So that will obviously inform the charger speeds available when it comes to installation. So the idea of this, and there's no commitment on Medway at this stage, but the idea is that KCC would act as a facilitating authority and tender a framework agreement setting out the key requirements for chargers across the whole network. And then it would be down to individual districts and Medway Council to enter into a contract with the winning supplier should we decide to take that option. So the contract would be a concession contract whereby the supplier will fund the works required and provide a revenue share back to the local authority. As I say, the conversations are ongoing, but this approach would help ensure a seamless charging link for EV users when travelling in and out of Medway. There's also a bit on there about the refit programme that is led by the Council's Capital Projects team. I won't say an awful lot on that, but obviously there's some charging locations have been identified as part of that process and are scheduled to be taken forward over the next year. On the left-hand side there, you can see that we've also had some discussions with a number of stakeholders and suppliers as well. So it's about, engaging with them and setting things up. So when we're ready to go, we've got those contacts and we've made that engagement. Okay, so obviously the strategy and the EV district network is the long-term project over the next year. But we're very conscious that it would be really good to accelerate the installation of a few chargers in advance of any wider rollout across Medway. So we've started work on this and we've built it into a roadmap document. So this shows the overall direction of our EV work over the coming months. So just to take you through a few details there, we've broken it down into planning, stakeholder engagement and implementation. So you can see here on the planning section, we've got some of the work streams that we've already started. So we've got the dedicated web page there, we've got the FAQ document. We've set out all our officer group meetings that help guide this process. And obviously we've got reference in there to our draft strategy, which we are obviously currently producing. What we've also added in there is the potential for the pilot, up to 3 sites potentially that we can introduce, as I said, in advance of any wider rollout across Medway. So the planning for that is put into that first part of the roadmap. Moving on to stakeholder engagement, I think this is pretty much, most of this is around the pilot. And getting some stuff on the ground quite quickly. So you can see we've done a bit of soft market testing there in terms of making that engagement and that contact with suppliers to sound them out on it. So there we set out the sort of process that we would go through there. So we've got things like establishing the power network capacity, bit of internal consultation, identify appropriate sites. Then it goes through to producing a tender for the pilot sites, appointing a contractor, and all that sort of thing. So we've plotted it all out there in terms of stakeholder engagement.
Sorry, can I just stop you there for 1 minute? Sorry, I know it wouldn't, but I think that pilot thing, is that being done in conjunction with Kent?
No.
Because presumably, they will want a pilot as well, won't they?
They may well do, yes, but obviously this is reflecting obviously the desire of the board to bring forward a few sites in advance of a wider rollout. So we'd be going out on our own on this one, but obviously there are things that we can use from our work as part of the Kent district work as well. So this would be in advance of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, that sets out the time frame for looking at those pilot sites, doing some analysis on them, and eventually getting to a stage where we appoint a supplier for that piece of work. And then just at the bottom there, we've got some implementation dates. So we're looking at, so I just need to move that. So the target date for the pilot sites will be obviously being Q2 next year. So that is the last slide. You can see here we've also got under implementation, we've also got a reference there into the MHS broadside scheme, and I believe Matt is going to provide some details on that for us. If you're happy to move on to that, Chairman.
Yeah, let's hear that, please.
Okay, so what I'll do, if I unshare my screen. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Chair. Yep. I've only got one slide for everyone. You'll be pleased to know. I'll just quickly share. It's just some photos, but let's see. Desktop. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased to obviously let the board know, and I'm grateful to Councillor Goldwyn for mentioning it at the start. The business change team were tasked with putting in EV pilots for our children's and adult services out of MHS Broadside. We've delivered this project in 8 weeks from negotiations with MHS Homes. It's their site. It's right through to actually delivery of the vehicles. You'll see there that we've got 6 chargers installed and 6 BMW i3 vehicles, fully electric, for our children and adult service fleet. This will be a 12-month pilot, and we'll be monitoring how it goes, and obviously feeding back to the board at the end. But I'm obviously really pleased that this is the first of hopefully many to come. So thank you very much. And
right, thank you. Can I then ask if anyone has any questions, or I mean, I think we made quite a lot of progress in the last quarter, and I think that we've now got a good handle on where we're going, I think, which we didn't have before. So, Adrian, did you want to say something first, and I'll take Piers next.
And you've got Simon Curry as well now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Howard. The bit that worries me is, as I suspected, when I read through the FAQ paper on page 5, if we want to go into fast charging, we actually will need to have 3-phase electrical supply. Now, I think this is going to be a real challenge for us, and I think we need to really get a handle on this very, very early on in the process, because I well know that there's a business in Rochester that has been trying for at least the last 12 months, possibly a little bit longer, to get a 3-phase electrical supply to the premises, because they want to run it as a restaurant, and they need, for that catering equipment, they need a 3-phase supply. Now we're talking about in the heart of Rochester, where it's taken over a year, and I believe the last time I spoke to the lady concerned, whose business it is, just about 4 or 5 weeks ago, she still hadn't managed to get that three-phase supply in. And I think UK Power Networks, we've got to get to grips on this, because if you look at the sort of the urban sort of residential street level of power distribution, it is all single phase. The three-phase supply is only up to the substations, and then from then on it is all single phase. So, you know, if we've got this ambition, and it's the right ambition to have, believe you me, I'm 100% in favour of it. This is why I'm trying to emphasise this, that we do need to get this sorted out very, very quickly, and we also need to establish who's got to pay for it, because referring back to that business in Rochester, they were trying to make the business pay for that connection, which was running into tens of thousands of pounds, literally, to get one premises supplied with a three-phase supply. So and this is so basic. If we want for our visitors to go for fast charging, for slow charging, it's not really much of a problem. If we're talking about only 3 or 4 kilowatts, that's not too bad. But mind you, if you start adding that up over a large area, it soon mounts up. And certainly at fast charging rates, it's not too impossible to imagine that over an area, certainly the size of a large estate or something, we are talking about megawatts of power required, which is, a different ball game altogether. So I'd like officers' comments about how far we've got with this, and because this is the real building block of it. If we don't get this in place, we're not going to move any further. So I'd like from officers their comments of how far they've got. We're talking with UK Power Networks to get this basic infrastructure in to start with, please.
And is that something which is, do you think, is Kent-wide as well?
It will be, yes. It's not just Medway.
So we want to get really need a joint approach, don't we?
Yeah.
Anyway, can the officers update us on that, their response to that?
Yes, I can make a few comments on that. I noticed Lucy has got her hand up. I don't know if she wanted to comment on this.
I've got a lot of people with their hands up here, but yeah. So.
No, Michael, I didn't want to comment. I just had a couple of questions from Councillor Tranter that I didn't want to get lost, so I'll just wait my turn. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Lucy. Yes, I think you're quite right to raise it being a Kent-wide issue. What I would say is I think I referenced it in the presentation, that as part of the EV district, there has been some initial work undertaken by UKPN, and they've RAG rated each of our potential sites. And for the 7 kilowatt fast charging, we've actually got, for a lot of our car parks, we've actually got a green rating for those. So the indication is that there is a way forward there in terms of accessibility of an appropriate power supply. Clearly, when you go up to the super fast charging, 50 kilowatts and above that, it is less certain. But obviously that is a work stream that we will develop. Obviously, we'll develop it as part of the EV district network work with Kent, but we also need to be mindful of it for our potential pilot as well. So yes, that is a key piece of work that we'll be undertaking.
Okay, can that be fed in, please, so that that goes into your work plan, and it also will be in the updates we get each meeting, please.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem.
Well made, thank you very much. Piers.
So I'm really pleased with the progress that's been made, particularly relating to the concession. I'm a little interested to understand what the length of the concession is, whether it's just 150 car parks that are going to be covered by it, or whether it's all the land, or potentially all the land, owned by Kent and Medway Council. And also whether or not we've had any discussions with other fleet vehicle users, such as, I don't know, Southern Water and so on, who may also be interested in schemes like this that cover such a broad area. and then whether or not there's been any thought about an app for the region, because I know that one of the powers of having a network is in relation to the people that can use it, and the app would kind of facilitate that and make it a lot easier, increase the uptake of it, increase the value of that concession as well. And the more information we can put into a data room for these bidders, the more competitive those bids are likely to be over time, and the more revenue the council will ultimately get from this. So there are a few different issues to unpick there, I think. I'm also aware that the IPA, the Infrastructure Projects Authority, have specific teams that help councils run PPP processes. So if we're not in touch with them about this, we should probably get in touch with them.
Oh, that's a very good point. Can you take that one on board, Michael? I think if you haven't already done that, I think it's a very important point.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we'll make a note of those comments, and we'll make sure that those issues are covered as part of our conversation with Kent. But it does certainly, at the moment, it relates to the 150 car parks, public car parks across Kent and Medway, rather than any wider land.
Okay. Quickly to follow up on that. So in relation to the 150 car parks and the points that have been made about the RAG rating for UKPN, there is a danger that the concession has the kind of jewel in the crown and gives away some of the most lucrative sites potentially, when actually we need a kind of cross-subsidization across a network, well, to basically increase the size of the network by taking some of the revenue from those car parks for other local sites to increase the number of users and the number of sites.
I think it's a very, very good point, Piers. I think what we've got to do is we've got to have a look at this. We will need a proper report to this board before we sign up to this finally. You know, we really must. And I think these points have got to be borne in mind. We've got to make sure we get a good deal. It always sounds a good deal if someone's willing to, stamp up and pay for these things. But I'm very well aware, as Piers is, I think that there's always catches in this sort of thing. And we could end up unwittingly blundering into something because we don't know, necessarily, we haven't got any track record on it. And I'm very keen that we first of all do take advantage of the experience elsewhere, and secondly that we actually do really ask ourselves as property owners, if you like, what are the implications? Because we've got to understand those clearly, and it needs to be understood, generally across the council. Because we don't want to give away something and then spend the next 10 years wishing we hadn't. So, Simon. Simon,
thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I think probably my points are kind of related to the discussion as it's going on, really. First of all, just to say how exciting it is to see our Children and Adult Services already signed up to this in a big way already, and I have looked through the FAQ sheets that were produced, and they're really helpful actually. So that's really good step forward there, definitely. My question really is about a couple of points really. First of all, you talked about the appropriate sites that you're going to be using over the coming year. I mean, what's the criteria for selecting these, and how is it? Because obviously we've got land use conflicts going on all the time, and I'd be interested to know how you're going about choosing sites. What's that based on, and what might not be done on those sites if these sites become permanent. And in relation to that, I'm thinking of the sort of long-term thinking of to how we roll this out over time. Have you started that process in your own minds as to how you think, is it going to be curbside charge? I'm thinking of the streets in the centre of Chatham and Rochester and Gillingham where obviously parking is at a premium already and stuff like that, or is it fast charging, or is it a combination of those? Have you got any progress on your thinking in how that would happen going forward? So, because obviously in the next 10 years, everything's going electric in that timescale.
This is why I think we've got to plug in. Thinking's gone in yet. And
I appreciate that. I'm just wondering where we are on it.
Plug in, I think, to the guidance that's available nationally. You're very right. It's a very difficult thing. I mean, Michael's done quite an awful lot of research himself, I know, but we can't cover all of it. And I think we've got to actually take advantage of the experience that there is, even in this new technology elsewhere. So you're very right. But I think at the moment, of course, the bid is being, as you heard Michael say earlier, that this is actually based upon car parks. But again, in car parks, what are you going to do? You're going to have one going to have one point, and then everybody has to queue up for it for hours, while somebody leaves theirs on there. Or are you going to have 10 points in the car park, and then what are you going to do with all the other people that want to park, and you're stuck there for a while. So it's quite a lot of thinking needs to go into all this.
It is indeed, and you've just sort of made my final point there. That I understand that a new garage, I think is it Shell who've opened a new garage, and there's a gym attached to the side of it where you can charge your car and go and work out whilst it's charging. So I was wondering if we'd had any interest from private companies like that as well. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, Vince, would you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much, Howard, and thank you, Michael, for a really good presentation and also the documents attached with the agenda. I just want to pick up on a couple of points within the FAQ and also a wider point around how this strategy may interact with the local plan and whether there will be specific reference within the local plan or whether it will be a reference to our policy, just to get some clarity around that. On the FAQs, I mean, people would have heard me say on this advisory board historically, my fear is we're going to put a whole load of infrastructure in, and electric cars might end up as the Betamax of vehicles in one sense. That everyone will move to
around hydrogen cars. Yeah,
indeed. Well, people might move to hydrogen quite quickly for some of those reasons, and I know hydrogen is mentioned within the FAQs, but where our thinking is on that in a bit more detail would be helpful. The other thing from a very practical perspective as ward councillors is I noticed in there, obviously there's one of the FAQs is around what's the practical process when these things are being put in. I know it is probably being a hostage to fortune a little bit, but there is no estimated time scale. So if it's, is it 2 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 6 months? Sometimes things will overrun. Of course, I think we all accept that by a day or two, but having no time scale in there at all at the moment probably will give people cause for concern. And so it'd be helpful, I think, to add that in. Thank you. But it's a great piece of work. And, as you've heard from others today, it's very, very positive.
Gary. Then I'll bring Lucy and the other officers in after that. Gary.
Yeah. Thank you, Howard. Similar to Vince, I have an issue around the Betamax issue. I do honestly think that perhaps if we get the self-driving cars up and running, then self-driving taxis will be around, and maybe no one will actually own a car. And we're putting a lot of money and effort and infrastructure into people just thinking that we're just going to continue as we are today, but go electric. I wonder if there's any thought put into the strategy about what we think is going to happen if we have self-driving cars and self-driving electric cars, which may be very, very cheap to use, and therefore the actual ownership of a car might change completely.
Well, I think it's how far. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid point. I don't know how far we can plan ahead for that. Catherine, could you just, I think, be useful if you actually covered the questions relating to the local plan?
Yeah.
What that says about electrical vehicles and other forms of propulsion.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Maple, for your question. And yes, we will be making reference. In fact, I was just forwarding the papers for this evening's meeting with some of the discussion to a colleague who's working on both the energy and the transport sections of the local plan, just to make sure that our references are up to date in finalising the document. Obviously, within the local plan, we have a number of objectives that we need to address in order to achieve the vision that we have for Medway's growth. Environmental factors and sustainability are part of those, and through the plan we need to demonstrate how we're addressing a number of the aspirations that we have. So we would see the work that the low emission strategy takes forward and link to this the electric vehicle strategy as well as part of our opportunities to improve air quality and to address some of the climate change issues. So it's something that we would be referring to in terms of supporting evidence for the policies and the direction of the local plan. What I doubt we will be doing is mapping out in detail, for example, the sites which we're talking about this evening, because I think as the discussions recognised, this is still quite a fast moving environment. We need to make sure that there's the right hooks in the local plan to be able to provide the flexibility over time as technologies change, as patterns of how people are moving, etc. change. But certainly with regards to looking at new development, that's something we'll be looking at in terms of the requirements for new builds and significant conversions, to look at the opportunities to build the technology and the provision into the sites bringing forward. And certainly with things like a viability assessment, that's the sort of measures we'll be looking at to ensure that those can be supported through policy. So I think it's a mixture of, we will get some specific hooks and we'll be aligning to the emerging, what's current policy and the direction of travel on some of these, but we need to be clear that the local plan is pointing to these sort of interventions as the means to achieve some of the environmental ambitions that we have for Medway's growth.
Could I ask in simple terms, without quoting as large sections of the local plan in the future, at some future date, do you think you could brief the board really, in the sense just do a small paper simply summarising what is in the local, how the local plan, if you like, will relate to electric vehicles and so on? So
yep.
It would be helpful actually.
We're happy. I think we have a standing item to bring back further work on policies and local plan. More than happy to liaise with other officers to get a slot on a future agenda and bring that back to members. Certainly before we get into finalising publications, it would be useful to get feedback from members on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Lucy, you had a couple of questions which I know Stuart raised. One was to do with the localised power delivery issues. I think we've rather covered that one.
Yes, I would agree, Councillor Doe.
The other one was about active travel, as to asking the question, which is a very good one, but I'm not sure we've got an answer. But
no. Would you like me to ask that? I know we've still got active travel.
But I think we'll get an answer.
Yeah, I'll ask the question now, but obviously Michael has still got to give his presentation on active travel. What Councillor Tranter has asked is, we need to significantly increase and encourage active travel, but with increased housing over the next 10 years or so, our roads will also need to cope with increased cars. Do we have the means to manage both objectives? No increased delays for drivers while still adding more bike lanes? Are there specific concerns? But Michael can maybe come on to that once he's done his presentation. Thank you, Councillor Doe.
Okay, thanks. And it's all going to be a question of balance, and it's all a question of trying to predict what car traffic will be. And we were talking earlier, weren't we, just now, about how difficult it is to actually say within points that Gary was making, really, about what's the volume of cars that are likely to be there. But anyway, Michael, you've heard the discussion. I think there's concern generally about understanding the nature of any agreement. I mean, I think we're all enthusiastic about putting some out on the ground, these pilot ones, but I think it would be, we're going to have to look very carefully before we actually sign up to a large agreement. And there are all sorts of things like, can we make sure that they cover bad, in inverted commas, bad or less profitable sites, as well as those that are obviously going to be used vastly. And also, how the general understanding of how it's going to be financed, what it does to our asset base. You don't want to find that you're trying to do something, and at the end of the day, you've got cars piling up in a particular place that you don't actually want them to be piling up in, and so on. It's quite a very tricky issue. You're probably all too aware of it, but just wonder what your general reaction was to all that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think you're absolutely right. There are so many issues to take into account here. What I'd quite like to do with your and the board's agreement is actually to do a very short report on the Kent EV district work that we've been undertaking, just to give the board a bit more information and a bit more detail about how that's going to work, how that's going to be procured, and what the requirements are going forward. So I'm happy to take that as an action.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, did you want to come in? Your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly to build on Michael's answer. In terms of the Kent project, obviously we would look to agree a memorandum of understanding between Medway, Kent and all of the districts involved, and all of that will come back up to leadership and senior management to obviously sign off.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Does anyone more questions in relation to this. It's a very difficult issue, but I think actually there's a lot of work going into this, and I think it's beginning to show some fruit.
So if you're happy, Howard, shall we move on to active travel? And Michael,
yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I just want to make sure everyone was happy with that one, because that's the most difficult one, I think. Okay, active travel, off we go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a very brief update from me on this one, Chair. As you may be aware now, we have successfully secured some active travel funding under tranche 2 from the government. So that is our grant is £927,000. So our bid was based on 5 schemes that we put forward to the DFT. So our intention now is to undertake an initial design and feasibility assessment of all of those 5 schemes. So we'll take each one to a certain level, and then we'll make some decisions about which ones we actually deliver with this active travel funding.
Choose one, aren't you?
Well, we need to do the initial design and the feasibility study, but I'm keen to do all 5 schemes up to that stage, and the reason is quite often additional funding opportunities come along, so I think it's quite important that if we do drop a scheme as part of active travel, we have the bones of it there, so we can take advantage of any future funding streams that come forward. I think it's always good to have a few schemes in the bank, as it were. So that is essentially what we're doing at the moment. So we've got potential schemes for Rochester High Street, Chatham Hill, Cuxton to Strood, Four Elms Hill, and Darland. So those schemes.
What are your timelines for those schemes, just so that people understand?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So we had the funding confirmation, I think it was last week or the week before last. So what we've done is we've already commissioned one of the schemes out to a consultant to have a look at for us, and the remaining 4 schemes will be developed in-house with our own highway design team. And the DFT have indicated that they would like us to try to implement all the schemes by the end of March 2022. So that is the next stage for us, is obviously developing that high-level program, but that is the end date that we'll be working to for that delivery.
Okay, and presumably there'll have to be some public consultation with them?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the reasons the announcement of Tranche 2 was so delayed by government is that they were quite nervous in a way, because the majority of Tranche 1 schemes, there wasn't sufficient time to undertake adequate consultation, as we would normally would with our schemes. So they are at great pains to stress to us that consultation is a very important part of Tranche 2. And we are preparing a communication strategy that we will publish on our website, and that is a requirement of the funding. So yes, there will be full engagement on these schemes, which is actually a relief, really.
Right, okay, thank you. Any questions on that relating to the active travel bid? Okay, and I take it the answer I gave on this question of the whether you can guarantee that cycle lanes are designed in a way that cause the minimum delay to traffic, are they not? And not necessarily following roads all the time, are they?
That's absolutely right, Chair. That's absolutely right. It is very challenging for us and all other local authorities, really, particularly when you have an established highway network. So with an existing network, it's often very challenging to implement the traditional cycle lanes without taking away capacity from the carriageway itself. So that is a big challenge, particularly in Medway, where we have a lot of roads that aren't particularly wide. So it does require us to think outside the box a little bit and look at alternative ways of providing cycle routes, as I call them. And I think one of our active travel schemes is that link between Cuxton and Strood, and that is away from the carriageway. And actually, it could be potentially a really nice route alongside the river there.
And Darland as well.
And Darland as well, that's right. So we have to be a little bit creative and accept that our, taking capacity away from our roads isn't always a sensible thing to do. So we need to look at other solutions. And as you quite rightly said, get that balance. But certainly with new developments, the opportunity is there to build in-cycle infrastructure from the start.
I agree.
And
Sorry, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Howard. Yeah, just a quick question to Michael, whether there's likely to be any further tranches of active travel funding from the government in the future, because there's certainly a lot of appetite from the community to look at ways of walking and cycling better around Medway to favour those over the car, and certainly there's some ideas for other areas that could benefit from this funding in the future.
Yes, if I may, Chairman, if that's right, I can. Yeah, certainly. I think there is a big commitment from central government to provide further funding opportunities as we go forward outside of the active travel, and I think that is the reason why I think we need to start preparing these schemes, really. So we've got these in the bank, so when these opportunities come along, we can take them. At a smaller scale as well, we also have our local transport plan funding. So we do a lot of minor works as well in terms of improving facilities for pedestrians and cyclists. So it's very much on our radar, and as I say, we will be looking out for these funding opportunities.
Right, thank you very much. Any other member? In that case, then, can I thank you very much, Michael and Matthew, for your presentations. That's very helpful. And we'll then move on to item 5, which is the heat mapping and energy master planning study, which is in the hands of Matt Pinder and Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be giving the update today.
Sorry, you've got a legacy hand there. Thank you. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be giving the update on this item. So sort of a bit of background to this. So sort of a heat district network is essentially a pipe work of insulated pipes that take heat from a distributed source and obviously feeds that to new homes and potentially new businesses. So this is a huge opportunity for Medway, and the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy have a specialist department called the Heat District sort of Network Unit, and they obviously support local authorities with funding and to obviously to see whether we can realise these ambitions. Now, this is underpinned, in terms of heat district networks, is underpinned in a lot of literature from central government right through to local government. In particular, obviously the Kent and Medway low emission strategy, which is going through right now, and also the TriLEP south to east energy strategy as well. So off the back of that, we obviously put in a bid for some funding from HNDU. We were pleased to get circa £45,000 worth of funding towards a heat mapping and energy master planning study, to essentially, obviously the findings of which will dovetail into the HIF work and also the WHO development framework and other pieces, the local plan, for example. Sorry, Chair.
I know that you've done this, I think, for Rochester and Chatham, haven't you?
Yeah, there was a study completed by Atkins for sort of Chatham and parts of Gillingham, and that study was actually produced without the council's involvement, which was a bit odd. So we only found out about that when we put in the bid for this funding. And unfortunately, because we can't duplicate works, we can't obviously duplicate funding streams. The scope for this particular study, will focus primarily on the Hoo Peninsula, but will also cover Strood and Rochester as well. And there's a separate study that's going to look at Chatham and look into river source heat pumps, which is really exciting. But obviously, sort of this study that I'm talking about, sort of focusing on Hoo, Strood and Rochester, has benefited from £45,000 worth of funding, 15,000 of which will go towards project management. And I'm really pleased to announce that we've got a consultancy called Avico who will lead on this project on behalf of the council. And we're currently going out to procurement for specialist consultancy on the Kent Business Portal for obviously that work to start in earnest in the new year. We anticipate that the study itself will take about 4 months, and I hope to share, and officers will hope to share the findings of which with this board when it's all completed. And then from there on, the ambition is to take it through 2 other phases, which is essentially techno-economic feasibility, which looks into the kind of the economics behind the installation. And then you have detailed planning stage, which is actually getting pipe work in the ground. So it's quite a process, but we're at the start of that process.
Government will actually finance.
Yeah, there are funding streams available for that going forward, and we've actually got a HNDU project manager who's supporting council officers and AVCO with this initial stage, the first stage, which is the mapping stage. And then they will essentially hold our hand through the different stages, and there is funding available from central government to support any rollout going forward. So that's everything from me, Chair, but happy to take any questions on that.
I just express a hope that, although I understand the reasons why you've had to concentrate it in a particular area, and then we've got the rest of the study, being a member for the eastern part of the borough, if you like, I do think it's going to be quite important actually to make sure that at some stage we can get them in. So we need to be, I think in many ways the eastern part is very interesting because you've got a lot of estates there, where you might be able to, and still some building happening. I know Pooh is the one where there's a lot of building likely to be happening, but there's quite a lot of building going on the eastern part too, actually. So, I do think it's interesting to have that. So please don't forget that. Okay. Are there any questions on that? Well, there you are. You've deafened them all with your erudition. Thank you very much.
Chair, we got one question.
We got a question.
Piers.
Yeah, Piers, what from there?
Hi, I'm just curious to check that we're going to be looking at industrial off-takers as well as future residential. So, potentially people like VT Rice and Strood and so on. And then actually looking at sources of heat as well in terms of any potential future data centers that are massive heat producers.
Yes.
Happy to answer that, Chair.
Okay, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Yeah, certainly the study will look at all kinds of heat uses. That's what we've asked the specialist consultants to look at in the specification document, and also take into account any future potential development as well. So that's obviously liaising with major landowners on the Hoo Peninsula, but also in terms of potentially retrofitting in Strood and Rochester as well. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So I didn't catch the first one. If you could please remind me on that one.
We're talking about data centers as a source of heat, and also about the industrial users. But I think you've answered that in terms of future proofing.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Vince.
Technology, that's a wonderful thing. Just following on from Piers's question, really, and that's around very specifically the innovation park and what conversations have been had about that, particularly, not least because I think Piers is right. Some of the, if we're looking at those future tech type companies, which is certainly what I want to see in there, many of those can be quite big generators of heat. So whether there's any specific conversations happening about that, obviously subject to what happens at special council later on this month. Okay, would you like to have a go at answering that, Matt?
Absolutely fine, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Maple. Yes, to answer your question, IPM has been thrown in the mix in terms of consultants to look at that particular site. However, I must stress that obviously red line boundaries have to be reviewed as and when we get the specialist consultant on board. And obviously we agree every single site they're going to look at with them prior to do their mapping exercise.
I think this is a very important one that will need to be looked at, though, because of its sheer scale. Okay. Right, then, I'm going to move on unless anybody else has any questions. Right. Then we'll come on to general updates, which I think really will start off with the solar together. Would you like to take this one, Lucy?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Councillor Doe. You've been provided with a paper on the Solar Together scheme, which provides you with an update. So I'm just going to go over that briefly. Registration for the Solar Together scheme closed on the 5th of October. The auction took place on the 6th of October and personal recommendations were sent out from the 26th of October. Registrants have until the 11th of December to decide whether they want to accept the offer. Once accepted, the winning installer will contact each resident to survey their roof and set an installation date. All installations are planned to be completed by the end of May 2021. So that's kind of where we are with the project at the moment. But we had a very good uptake across Kent and Medway. There were 4,025 people who registered their interest, and out of those 4,025, 381 of those were from Medway. So I think there's been a good uptake to the scheme.
Right. And presumably there'll be further schemes, will there, at some point?
I would hope so, Councillor Doe. I'm not aware of at the moment, but yes, I hope there would be.
Because I think it could be quite important to make sure that we, as it were, keep tabs on this, so we can say, look what's happened, this is great for these people that are saving, why aren't you? You know, and it's that sort of thing.
Yes, have maybe some case studies on people who've taken it up and then show their energy savings. That's something we can look into doing.
Okay, Vince.
Thank you for the update, Lucy. I mean, what would be interesting, I guess, in one sense as well, if we are able to gather this information, I'm not sure with this process whether we can or not, is to understand why residents drop out of the process as well. So, because in some senses, it would be great for the number that step forward, and that's I think a relatively good number of those who've gone through the process. There will be some that drop out at different points. And it will be interesting to know whether it's cost, whether it's inconvenience of the work happening. And if we know that, we can perhaps feed that back through the process to say more work needs to be done in this area. But no, that sounds like a good number. And looking at the map, a relatively good spread. The urban areas seem a bit light, but perhaps there's more work. That's one of the things to do, perhaps more work to be done in some of the urban areas. And that cost may be a factor, of course. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, I think we're still on the learning curve with this, but I think that you're right. We need to know. I think it'd be useful to make that inquiry if we can. Lucy, I don't know whether you probably have that information, haven't you? Why people have dropped out?
At the moment, we wouldn't know because obviously they've still got until the 11th of December to know who's going to actually take up the scheme.
Well, it would be useful if we can just round robin them and say, you know, are there any? Two things really. Are there any ways in which you might be interested? You know, is there anything holding you back, as it were? If so, we can convert that into a yes. And if it's something simply that they dropped out because, then we'd be interested to know what that because is. See if there are any trends. So
I can take that point forward, Councillor Doe, and then obviously feed back to the group once we if that information is available to us. I would have thought it should be. Thank you.
Well, then we'll go on to the Kent and Medway Energy and Low Emissions Strategy, which I think Cabinet has now approved, isn't it? Was about to.
If I can take that one forward for you, Councillor Doe. The Kent and Medway Low Emissions Strategy went to overview and scrutiny on the 3rd of December, and it was passed through that committee. It's now going on to Cabinet on the 12th of January.
That's right. Yeah. So, are there any questions? I think that most people have at least had a pretty reasonable idea of what this commits us to. But I think it's generally a good thing that we are marching in step with Kent, because this kind of thing is not, it's very difficult to draw lines around these areas. Like, what the emissions have got to be good across Kent, not as we've seen in a sense with the tiering system, So it's the same sort of principle. Okay, are there any points that you'd wish to draw to our attention at this stage? Don't think there's any particular,
Not at this stage, no. As you've said, the main thing for us is that this climate change emergencies is such a big issue, and it can't be something that we can be dealt with on our own. So we need to be working in partnership with as many partners as we can to be able to tackle such a big issue.
Okay, fine. Then we come on to the action plan schedule.
Howard, sorry. Oh, sorry. Simon's hand's disappeared.
Oh,
No,
Simon, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. I was just struggling with the technology there. Just to let people know that I went along to the conference on the online event. It was a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately, it had a technical fault and only lasted for half as long as it should have done, but which is a shame. And it's very interesting, and a lot of good stuff was said. But I did feel, having heard what they had to say and gone through the strategy in a lot of detail, that I suspect a lot of the targets that are currently presented in it are probably sort of pessimistic ones. And it looks to me, with government policies that are coming through now regarding sort of installation of hydrogen boilers in houses and all the other work they're doing in relation to cars, is that I think the 2050 target may come down quite considerably. Right. So I suspect the strategy that's currently in place may well get revised quite dramatically in the next couple of years. That was the main thing I picked up.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think the trouble is they couldn't make a policy which they didn't have the resources to deliver. You know, at that time we weren't, I think anyone's sure really now how much resources will be devoted to it with all the other problems that the government faces. And you know, as one knows that, then I think you're right, the strategy will have to be revisited. But watch this space.
Can I just come in briefly on that and say, yes, there's always plans to revise the strategy as we go along. Also, Councillor Curry is quite correct. They did have a critical error on their presentations that they did when they had the Cross Kent meeting. And I know that they have plans in place to put the full presentations up on their website very soon. So as soon as we have the information on that link, we will be circulating that around as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Okay. The action plan schedule. Did you want to take this one, Richard, or how do you want to deal with this?
No, I think Sarah's going to deal with this one, Howard.
Okay, yeah. Fine.
Okay. So we're in the process of finalising the baseline report, which we're currently updating with 2019 figures. So that will give us a good idea as to a bit more accurate idea as to where we are with our baseline for ourselves as an authority. Well, these are going to be expected, we're expecting them back from the consultant by the end of the month. And after that, we'll then be able to finalise our action plan for further discussion with this group in the springtime.
Right. Okay, any questions? Thank you. Right, we now come on then to the Urban Tree Challenge Fund, which is really good news. I think the fact that we've managed to secure so many trees, I think it's tremendous. Very well done to the team that submitted this. Yeah. Now all we got to do is have a massive planting session.
Yes, exactly, Councillor Day. Martin Hall's kindly produced the paper which has been circulated with the documents for today. So I'm just going to give everybody just a quick update. As Councillor Doe's just said, the bid has been successful. The grant means that we now have funding to plant 13,842 small trees across 10 sites in Medway. The planting is planned for February 2021 and will involve volunteers working alongside council and Norse officers. The full list of sites can be found in the paper which Martin Hall has produced for you, but it's very good news, as Councillor Doe said. It's fantastic.
I think so. And it'll really make a difference. And I think the thing that we've got to get over, I think, also with volunteers, is they are our eyes and ears, and these are young trees that we're putting in. We're not obviously putting in full-grown ones, and they need looking after. And you know, if we get some kids pulling branches off, or maybe just the trees allowed to deteriorate, we shall have problems. And we don't want to. I know we'll have a loss rate, but we want to keep that loss rate as low as it possibly can. Yeah. So I think we need to give that some thought, really. As to, you know, we've got to assume, obviously, the first thing is get them all in. Yes, okay. But the next thing is, how do we look after them properly and make sure that the local community is interested in those trees and you know, make sure that they, as far as they can, that that they're allowed to grow?
You've got Simon Curry, Howard.
Yeah, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. This is a project that I'm quite closely involved in, so very exciting work. And a couple of points I'd like to make about it, if I may. Firstly, I mean, congratulations to both the Norse team and the council team who've managed to get this bid successful. The national trip, how to that, we scheduled it for February around about half-term week.
Medway Tree Week.
Probably need one, yeah. And we'll be sending them out in groups of 6 with a leader to show them how to plant and get them in the ground as quickly as possible. So that's all good news, and it'd be nice if we could do this sort of year on year as well. I think the Forestry Commission are planning to provide further funding going forward. So this is just the first of many mass tree plantings for Medway, hopefully. And I'd just like to mention a couple of points alongside that. Firstly, the Green Spaces team, as you know, have been working on the tree strategy for Medway, and as part of that, they did a canopy cover survey for the whole of Medway, which required an online, using aerial photographs and an online surveying technique called iTree. And that was done by the volunteers as well, and they managed to cover the whole of Medway in a space of about 3 weeks and surveyed. So we now know the canopy cover for Medway, which is around about 20%, and the trees we plant now will add to that. So that's a wonderful volunteer project that's been very successful in August.
Simon, do you know from your knowledge how that compares? I mean, we put that figure of 20.9. How does that work with other areas?
For urban areas, obviously it depends. I mean, you know, on the size of your town and city and things, but it's slightly above average for Kent, certainly for the other towns in Kent. And we've taken out the factor of the North Kent marshes not having hardly any trees at all. You have to remove that sort of from the equation to get an accurate figure. So it is variable, but it's slightly higher than the average for the southeast. But a lot of the Forestry Authority figures now show about 30% is a more healthy one for biodiversity and climate change generally.
Well, we'll get there in the end, I suspect.
We will. And just finally on that point, I don't know if anyone was aware of the Country File programme a couple of weeks ago, which launched a tree planting scheme, one for every child at school in the country. And I think that's about 750,000 trees. And every time you plant a tree, you log it on their website, and it adds up the figures then. So we're going to try and get engaged with that as well.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll try and focus that, Richard, if we may, on a Medway tree week or tree period of some sort, so we actually sort of quicken interest and there's enough publicity for it.
Absolutely, I think that's something that everybody would support. And Lynette's put something up in the chat as well, Simon, just to make some of the connections there, just to make sure that we're promoting what's going on, because that will encourage further activity. And then Howard, you've got Vince and Piers and Adrian next.
Yep, we're all lit up here, I tell you. Piers, would you like to come in first?
Hi, yeah, this sounds excellent. I'm just wondering what happened with Jackson Fields. It's simple, I guess.
I can answer that for you, Councillor Thompson. Martin's informed me that Jackson's Field was removed by Historical England as it was a scheduled ancient monument. So it's as simple as that. It couldn't be included.
Okay.
Oh, is it 4 pits, is it? I see.
Thank you.
Oh well.
Vince and then Adrian.
We get a silly answer, don't we? We really do. That's crazy. Never mind. Vince.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to follow on from Simon's comments, really. And I think one of the keys with this is to ensure that the community are involved in the planting. Now, clearly, that's going to be a challenge probably for most of next year as well, realistically. But, you know, as much that can be done from a socially distanced perspective would be a good thing. And the more the community are involved actively in planting these trees, the more they will collectively want to protect these trees. So I think, you know, I know Simon, pay absolute tribute to Simon with his non-councillor roles that he carries out, and, you know, he's an inspiration to the communities across Medway, and long may that continue.
Adrian.
just a thought that occurred to me. I mean, this is a fantastic project, you know, and I'm really, really keen on it because, as we all know, it's growing trees that actually sequester the carbon out the atmosphere. But the thoughts just occurred to me that is there a sort of, and it would have to be very, very long term, but an investment opportunity for us as a local authority to actually plant some trees that might be of use in the future for cabinet makers and that sort of thing. I was what's made me think about that. I know at Fort Amherst they've been planting walnut trees, for instance, because and that was a traditional thing to do on military installations, apparently, because walnut used to be the wood that they would make musket stocks out of. But I was just thinking, you know, we've got a number of very creative people here in Medway. I think, you know, in the historic dockyard that do make very good quality furniture and the like. I'm just wondering if there's, you know, if we could actually plant a selection of obviously native species, but that would be useful in the future to harvest. And that actually might give people an added interest as well. You know, it's just something else that could be done, you know, with wood, and people would take an interest in it from that point of view. Just a thought. It's just something that came off the top of my head, you know.
That's fine. That's very, very interesting. I think it's something we might have a look at some point, please. At the moment, of course, we need to get these in the ground fairly quickly. But I think you're right that you know, as we develop, we ought to have these kind of considerations.
Right.
Right. Anybody else?
No.
Now, have we got Lynette with us yet?
Yes.
We have.
We do.
Would you like to tell us about the things you're communicating and engaging with?
Yes. I'll share my screen with you. It's nice to talk something that's not COVID related, as I'm sure you all will agree with. Let me share my screen.
Oh. Nice tree you have.
It's not a real one. That's part of her background.
Oh, right.
It is real. I thought I had my screen shared. Sorry, I didn't think you were seeing me.
Yeah.
We've had it up for weeks.
Oh.
The tree. Right. Presentation. So apologies if the next slide is going to be a bit sort of what you could have had. To let you all know that we spread in Medway Matters, which unfortunately due to lockdown and things didn't go out. But this was just to show you all of the things that we've been doing digitally as well. So although obviously it couldn't go into Medway Matters, we have been pushing it out through our channels. So the grass verges, the LED lights, the air quality video, and all the things that obviously we've achieved in year one. The next Medway Matters, hopefully we'll have a whole new infographic and we can develop what we've done so far.
Thank you.
What we did put out though is all our recycling dates for Christmas, and you'll notice in the bottom we've talked about the tree fund as well. So I managed to squeeze that in for people donating, which people have been interested in. We've had quite a few comments and questions about it as well.
Excellent.
I just wanted to touch upon social media. So up until now, we've been pushing out messages on the main Medway Council posts or on the pages because we were working out what we should do. You know, are people interested in a sole climate change one? We do believe that, you know, if anyone follows the Medway Council, we've most of it at the moment is obviously about COVID. So I feel that our messaging sort of gets lost on there. So we've developed with the waste team. We're going to develop the waste team's current social media pages and make it into a more sort of green Medway, if you like. So we've been thinking about some names like Eco Medway, etc. So we've already got quite a good following that like that sort of thing, and then we're going to develop it even further. So when we start talking about things like the Urban Tree Fund and the EV pool trial, instead of it getting lost in the Medway Council one, we're going to develop a new one and then go and target these people that are interested in things like we're discussing. So I'm hoping when I come back to you in a couple of months' time, we'll have developed that and seen a real interest in what we're putting out there. And also I know that Councillor Golvin is particularly interested in us putting some messages out on the turtle doves at Riverside. So again, that's another prime example of one that this following would really like to see rather than the Medway Council one. Just to show you that we obviously supported the Solar Together scheme. I won't go into any more detail because Lucy's already done that and showed you how successful that was. Every month, sorry.
I said, well done. I think it was very good, that.
Every month we've been doing gardeners blogs. So this was just to show you that this was our December gardening blog. And again, going back to social media, we think that driving people to a site that is, you know, about gardening, about recycling, about all of these things will really help our cause grow even more. This is about reusable plastic. So we have been talking, and Councillor Doe, I know that you have been as well, about the Towards Plastic Free Medway group, and we are developing letters with them.
Schools as well, isn't there?
Yes, so we're developing a letter with them to be sent out to all schools to encourage them to sign up to Single-Use Plastic Free Initiative. So we've developed sort of, so when that goes out, we've developed this sort of graphic that everyone can do, all these small things. So it goes on our Small Changes campaign. And when that gets pushed out as well, we've got all the pretty stuff to go with it as well. So that was just to show you that that's been developed.
Excellent.
We're also working with Norse to encourage more people to throw litter or take it home with them. So we've come up with a few ideas. These haven't been designed, but just to show you a few of the things that we've put together, which obviously, if you read them, they allude to famous songs.
I see. I thought that was encouraging people to bin their babies. I thought that was a bit. I know we got a big bill for children's services, but let's go.
Maybe you're not a Britney Spears fan, Howard. So we're developing these with Norse to encourage people to throw their litter away, and also we've seen in other sites. These are I don't think they've been used in other places, but where people are sort of doing something similar, it's caused quite a nice PR coverage. So and the main thing that I've been working on video. So following on from the air quality video that we did and we sent to schools and we've been promoting, we're doing a climate change video. So I've been writing all of that, and I'm going to have to, hang on, sorry. I'm going to have to reshare my screen with you. So I can get the sound. So this is just a quick snippet for you to show you what we're developing. It's gonna be quite long again, like the other one, but this was just to show you.
What is climate change? Climate change refers to a big change in global climate conditions. Including weather, temperature, and sea levels.
Yeah, so that's just the first few seconds of the video. I know a lot of interesting facts now, so if you want to ask me anything, I should know it. So, and that's it. That's it from us. So if there's any questions or obviously you want us to help promote all these great things, then let me know.
And you know that we want you to particularly to promote the growing of trees. You know, when we put our trees or planting period in, you have to decide whether it's going to be a week or whatever. We're going to need some good publicity for that.
Definitely.
Well, I think we probably ought to have some publicity around, well, I think we do, later on in the year when we get the, next year, actually, when we get our charging points in, our first charging points in, so we can then use that to explain to people what we're doing in the way of work, in simple terms on that. So
Yep.
I think we're not doing anything.
And hopefully by then we'll have, this whole new following that's really interested in things like this, and our messages won't go out with lots of other different messaging that we're putting out. It'll be solely focused on this sort of stuff and people who are interested. So we'll develop that now. So when we do talk about all this great stuff, it will go to all the people that we really want it to.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your work. That's really good. Really good.
Howard, I think Vince might be indicating there's a cross in the chat box. Yeah.
Right. Okay, Vince.
That's it. The wonders of crosses or Q's or hands is a wonderful thing.
Maybe one more time.
Indeed, Lynette, those posters were superb, I have to say, first and foremost. A few quick ones, if I may.
Yeah.
One of these might be appropriate for the Deputy Chief Executive to comment on, perhaps. Who knows? I agree with you that separating off and joining up with the Medway Recycles, certainly on Twitter, the Medway Recycles Twitter feed is popular, well respected, and good, frankly. So I think coming as part of that or joining in with that is a good thing. I wondered if there's, and I say this not as an expert, it's my weakness when it comes to social media, whether there's been any conversations about a specific Instagram page, because actually lots of this stuff is really visual and would probably be very popular. The making sure that when we're talking about 2025 and a City of Culture bid, that we're making sure that the work that is continuing to happen is talked about. There was some talk in Parliament, I think it was last week or the week before, about a potential, because we've got in 2022 another Queen's anniversary, and of course there may be an appropriate chance for a city status bid. And again, if there's any communications around that, if we choose to apply, I would want to make sure that these comms are critical. Thank you, Richard, for clarifying. I couldn't remember if it was platinum or I know it was more than gold. There we go. Hooray for the Queen in 2 years' time. And then just two practical things, I guess, really. There was a very small piece, I think, there on the slide you had with the Christmas dates, which, talking to a lot of residents, could do with probably being a full double-page spread, which is don't leave your single-use face masks on the floors of Medway, please. There's nothing more frustrating. I'm not sure if there's a public health risk with that, but it's pretty annoying and it's very untidy. And actually, lots of residents have been contacting me about that, certainly over the last few weeks. And just a final point, really, and I can't remember if I've mentioned this here or not, so I'll mention it again because it fits alongside those kind of music-based posters. And that's the fact that some other local authorities have used, I think, the really effective phrase of "don't be a tosser," and I think that's something which people will have mixed views on that, but I think it's pretty effective, and I think actually the public the vast majority of the public want to see climate emergency and their environment more generally being treated with respect, and actually that's I think it's an appropriate and hard-hitting message, but has, in the same way with those musical posters, an element of comedy to it as well, and the appropriate level of humour when we're dealing with that. And again, I know there's other councils that have got that as a phrase for their waste. So, yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. But no, really good work, and keep doing what you're doing, please.
Thank you. Just to talk about the don't be a tosser. We did talk about that a few years ago, actually, because it sort of developed in America, but then so many councils now over here have done it. I didn't want us to sort of just do the same, so we're actually developing or hopefully one of our own, so a bit like the music ones that I don't think anyone have used those music quotes before. Well, I hope not. we're going to develop something quite hard hitting, like Don't Be a Tosser, but with our own spin on it, if that sounds agreeable to everyone.
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent.
Okay. Right, we come now then to any other business. Is there any other business that any of the officers need to bring forward? First of all.
Councillor Doe, I've got an item if that's okay.
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, I just wanted to, I've provided you with a paper on the DEFRA air quality bid, so I just wanted to just give you a quick update on that. So just to let you know that Medway have supported a bid with other local authorities in Kent for funding from DEFRA's air quality fund. The project is to develop a digital resource for primary schools across Kent, which educates children aged 5 to 11 years and their parents about air pollution. The resource will include animated learning with an interactive storybook adventure, including gaming elements to earn rewards and unlock further information. The bid was submitted by Tunbridge Wells Borough Council with Canterbury City Council as a lead partner, with support from all local authorities, including Medway. We're expecting to hear if the bid is successful in March. I wanted to give everybody an update, and fingers crossed we will be successful.
Okay, well, if it is successful, then let's make sure that you let Lynette know, and she can make sure that people are aware of it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Councillor Day.
Any other officers before I go to the members of now of raising? Right, who was first? Gary, I think. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. Just interesting to note on your agenda item 8 about the air quality and switch off your engine when stationary. Now, I know that I did mention this, I think, at our very first meeting, that Medway has 4 areas of poor air quality, one of them being my local area, Rainham High Street. Yeah. We still do not have any signs telling the motorists themselves to switch off their engines. Now, here we are trying to bring this through and promote it through children, but why are we not just actually telling the public, or the driving public, that this is an area of bad air quality, and please respect and turn off your engines when stationary? I just don't understand why it's taken us so long to do anything about that.
Would you like me to answer that, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hackwell. It's kind of a catch-22 situation at the moment. We're in the conversation with the University of Kent about sort of this nudge behaviour, and what we would like to do is to actually do some work with them and some research and make sure that the messages we actually put out there are going to be effective. I could go and put signs up there tomorrow, but then that's going to affect the work that we do with the university. There's no point in doing the project with the university. This is sort of what they're saying to us. They would want to do their research with us, and one thing that they've said to us comes across quite clear is if those messages are actually coming from the council, people take less notice of them. They think there's other ways that we could do it which would be more effective. We've got a meeting with them hopefully next week with them to show us their proposals and you know what they can do for us, and I think it will be a case of we've either got to make a decision that we're going to pursue and work with the universities, which is obviously one of our action plan objectives as well, is to have that partnership working, or if we're not going to go down that route with them, then we can look at just putting the signs up. But at the moment it's kind of catch-22 for me. If I put the signs up, the university aren't so interested in doing the work with us.
Can we have an item please for the next meeting, decide which way we're going to go?
Yeah.
All right, is that all right?
Yeah, thank you, Lizzie.
Okay, Vince.
Thanks very much, Howard, and I think today's been a really good meeting actually, so thank you for that, and thanks to all officers for the work they've continued to do. I just wanted to pick up on the action point from the last meeting as regards cemeteries. I had a very useful meeting on site here at the cemetery in Chatham with Kalinda from Medway North. It was a very positive meeting. We talked about certainly the areas where wilding wouldn't be appropriate. Of course, there's quite a lot of that area, but there may be some areas that could be appropriate, and those conversations are ongoing, of course, particularly with James Brown's team from the council's perspective. So it's still work ongoing, really positive. And again, if we can use those sorts of public spaces in the appropriate sensitive way with the appropriate sensitive signage, I think that could add more value to our environmental progress that we're trying to make. Thanks.
Yes, I think we've got to look at all our sites gradually. We've gone for the target on the roads, but I think there are a number of other sites, and you're quite right. I think cemeteries and so on, I think are really places where we could possibly introduce an element of that. So can we make sure that's considered, please? Who's next? Piers, and then Simon. I think after that, Piers.
Right. This relates a little bit to the air quality point, but it's also, I guess I know all the offices are quite busy at the moment, but I've been talking to some drone companies, and I know that there are various different ones across the UK and in other countries that are looking for locations to trial their drones for commercial deliveries. So they're taking trucks off the road, and these are commercially viable at the moment. They are safe as far as I'm aware. So I know companies that have done 25,000 trial flights without any human intervention required. And I think there's potential for us to market Medway as a location, I guess, given the airfield and our heritage, to try this type of stuff out. There are particular requirements around the elevation of buildings and so on. So they look for tall buildings, potentially like the Pentagon, with a supermarket in, so that they can trial their deliveries. So that there might be something that we can do, given we own a building that has the type of characteristics they're looking for. But I guess we've got to be proactive and reach out to them. So it might be worth doing some market mapping to find out which companies are doing this and who might be interested.
Well, I think the answer probably is to talk to Amazon, since they've got quite a big base here.
It's not just Amazon doing it, but potentially that's an option as well. I think my understanding is there's a requirement for line of sight at the moment, so the building needs to be relatively tall, and that there needs to be some type of suburban area with gardens to land in.
Okay. Well, Richard, can you make a note of that, please? And we need to think how that can be taken forward.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I know we've got an awful lot of items to take forward, and it'll have to take its place in the queue, but it needs to be noted and brought forward at the appropriate time.
Yeah, we'll do, Howard.
Thank you very much. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. And just to very quickly do a couple of points I would like to mention. Firstly, just in relation to what you heard about the meadows, alongside that and talking with Norse, we've now got a group of volunteers who are more your expert types on botany and ecology, who've set up a recording group. So they're now going to start recording what comes up in these wildflower areas, and so they've set up a biological records database for Medway. It'll sit alongside the Kent one that already exists. So anybody who records anything from an urban fox to a sparrow or even to a rare orchid, they can then send their results in through the forum's website, the Urban Spaces Forum's website, and that'll be recorded. And that's a good way of measuring success. As we develop our urban meadows and our tree planting, the biodiversity of Medway should be going up, and this is how we're going to be recording some of that as it goes forward. So that's just one little announcement there. And the other one, which I've been asked to mention, and pardon the pun as it arrives, is that our environment is as much as part of our culture. So mention of our City of Culture bid. There's been a lot of calls of don't forget the green spaces, the old forest that we've got left, all that kind of stuff. And I've been told to mention the word arboriculture and horticulture as part of the bid. So there you go, I've mentioned it.
I think we're very conscious of the fact that the modern City of Culture has got to have as one of its key elements, I think, the fact that we're taking climate change seriously, and we're coming up with several initiatives that are really, and I think having the volunteers involved, for example, on a large scale, is something really a real plus factor. So that's very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Gary, do you want to come in?
I think that's legacy, actually, Howard.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, Howard, I'll just take it down.
Right, okay, then, Richard?
Thank you, Howard. You actually answered Simon's question for me, and Vince did raise City of Culture as well. So just to say that absolutely climate change will feature as part of our City of Culture bid, but our green spaces are absolutely integral to it. And part of our ambition is that for our year, people will be surprised and will come across cultural activities in places they might not be expecting it. So it's not just going to be the traditional platforms, but we are going to be looking for different and surprising and new and novel venues as well. And our green spaces are very much part of that. The consultant that we had in the very early days for City of Culture was absolutely impressed with the range of our green spaces, and they will very much feature as part of our City of Culture bid. That's all I want to say, Howard. Thank you.
That's all right. No doubt you'll raise that on another forum as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, if everyone has anything else they want to raise under any other business, then if not, can I thank you all, the officers, very much for their input. Very, very well done. It's a very difficult subject. I think we all acknowledge that, because there are so many facets and there's so many things we'd like to do, and you know, we're doing what we can, and I think you're doing it very well. And can I thank members for their interest and particularly for their ideas, which I think are very, very helpful to the whole process. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Great. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, members.
Bye-bye.
Well done,
Thank you.
Well done, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.